Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Ule Baba ki jai. We'll go on with chapter 27 in the Devi Bhagavatam retold by Ramesh Menon. Vedavyasa went on. Chanda and Munda arrived in the fragrant garden despoiled by a battle, its lily pools tainted with demons' blood. All its birds and gentle beasts had fled, but the Devis still sat astride their lion and sang softly to each other, and their golden laughter tickled them. Tinkled there. The two asuras saw the devastation around them and decided to first coax the goddesses with sweet talks. Chanda said, "Ah, perfect one, how sad it is to see such beauty wasted in savage war. The cowardly devas have sent you alone to your death. Such a pity, such treachery." Munda put in, "You have come to battle Shumba of the demons with just a dark Saki and a lion to fight for you. Don't you know who Shumba and Nishumba are? Don't you know that the host of Swarga fled before their sight? Why should you sacrifice beauty like yours for the sake of the Devas, who are not ashamed to send a woman to fight their battle for them? No, seek your delight in our Lord Shumba's bed. Be his queen, be queen of all the worlds. If you would only come with us and let your eyes see how magnificent is our king, you would not hesitate to be his wife." But the Devis laughed in their faces, and Ambika said, "Fools, shall I then leave Vishnu and Shiva and the Devas and marry an idiot demon? And for what? To be mistress of the worlds that are already mine and have been since long before there was a Shumba or a Nishumba. Do you even begin to know what you are prating about, witless demons? 1,000 Shumbas and Nishumbas have I known in the course of time, and killed them all, as I mean to kill you both today. And then Ratabija, Nishumba, and Shumba too. Why waste time on empty words, Asuras, when you are meant to be warriors? Pick up your weapons and prepare to die like heroes and find mukti for yourself." Chanda and Munda quivered with rage when they heard her. They raised their bows over their heads and pulled on their bowstrings so that the ground shook under their feet. But the Devi Ambika raised her shankha to her lips once more and blew such a note there that the 10 quarters of the sky trembled with the sound of the conch. Screeching, Chanda attacked the Devi with a flare of 5 arrows, but she cut them all down in a wink with archery like the demons had never seen before. The Devi answered the demon's fire with an arrow storm of her own, and it seemed the sun was blotted out with a swarm of locusts, while the sound those shafts made were deafening. Now Munda began to fight as well, and his valor was no less than his brother's. The sky seemed to take fire. Suddenly there was a clap of thunder over that field, and the Asuras saw the fair Ambika grow black as Kali. Next moment she emitted a third hideous goddess from between her eyes, and lo, she was fair again. The new dark Devi grew before their eyes. She grew immense and became truly dreadful. She was Bhadrakali. Her eyes were red as kadali flowers, her skin black as moonless nights. She wore elephant and tiger skin. Her fangs were like sharp ivory pillars. A garland of skulls was around her neck. Her breasts were large, her lips hung loose, and her tongue lolled out a yojana from her crimson mouth. Her belly was grotesque, like a deep, dry well. Her hair hung wild and loose, and she was 4-armed and bore an axe, a noose, and a trishul in her hands, which were dark as pitch. The demons quailed at the very sight of her. She was like the night of disillusion embodied, quaffing thirstily from a vat of raw liquor that she carried. Then, licking her lips, she rushed at the Asura army, undulating weirdly. She launched herself at them like 100 Yamashaktis. She picked up great war elephants and their monstrous riders, thrust them into her yawning mouth, and chomped on them in delight. Crooning with rivulets of blood flowing down her jowls, she swept up whole legions and chewed them up like dainties. Her fangs shone scarlet, as now and then she spat out the axle rod of a chariot she had consumed and used it for a toothpick. In wrath and terror, Chanda summoned a lucific chakra and cast it at Bhadrakali. The weapon spun at her wailing, but she caught the incendiary disc in her dark hands and blew it out as if she was extinguishing a night lamp. She cast her subtle noose at Chanda, and he was bound fast and helpless. Struggle as he would with his gigantic strength, using every spell he knew, he could not free himself from that umbilical pasa. Seeing his brother quelled, Munda flew at Kali. He summoned a feral Shakti and hurled it at her. But Kali shattered that weapon of 100 fires with an astra called the Isika, and the flames of that Shakti were doused in the sky. Then marvelously the pasa that held Chanda fast divided itself in two, and Munda was also bound in coils of light and could not move. Meanwhile, Ambika and the lovely Kalika on their lions raised the rest of the demon army with astras that blew phalanxes to shreds or immolated columns of Asuras into white ashes. Laughing wildly now, Bhadrakali brought Chanda and Munda to Ambika, trussed up like wolves. She roared to the fair goddess, "I have brought you 2 animals for your sacrifice. Accept them, O Devis." In the yagya, there is no envy, only purity. Let the Devas' work be done. Kali smiled hideously as the demons sullied themselves. She crooned, "Let the sacks of mine be as the Upashtamba, and here is the offering." With that, she hewed off the 2 Asuras' heads with a single stroke of her glinting blade and greedily drank the blood that spouted from their necks like mountain springs. The delighted Ambika cried, "Be known now as Chamunda from now on that you have killed Chanda and Munda," and Kali would be known as Chandika and Chamundeshwari, for the 2 demons were saved that they died at her blessed hands. Shocked to see their generals killed, the Asuras fled back to Shimba on his throne. Those that Ambika and Kalika left alive came as piteously as had the men Adrumra Lakhana's men before them. They came howling, all of them wounded, many dismembered, and they stood shaking before their sovereign. Those demons wailed like terrified children, "Ha ha, save us, Lord. Chandika means to consume the worlds today." One vile demon cried, "She burns like the fire at the end of time, and no one can contain her. Chanda and Munda are dead." She cut off their heads with her axe and drank their blood until there was not a drop left, and their corpses were white as ghosts. Then she cast them aside like dolls she was tired of playing with. Ah, Lord, she picked up whole columns of our soldiers, elephants, chariots, and all, and ate them. And Ambika and Kalika were hardly less terrible. Their astras were their cracks of doom, yawned before us, and our legions fell in and perished. Another said, "There are 3 terrible Devis. There are 3 terrible Devis, where there were 2. A river of blood flows in your garden, my lord. Your demon's flesh is the sludge of that river. Their broken chariot wheels are its whirlpools. Their several hands and feet are as fish, their heads struck off like floating tumbai fruit. Their arms and legs the sharks, and the golden lion stalks the banks of this river, his jowls crimson, feeding on the dead as he wails, roaring with joy. A third demon said, O Sumba, the Devi means to extinguish our race. We beg you, while there is still life left in us, let us flee to Patala, give the Devas back their dominions, and let us live in peace. Just think, my lord, 3 women have disseminated your invincible legions, more than 100,000 asuras whom the Devas could not vanquish. This is the hand of fate, a great warning. Pay heed to it, O Emperor. For when their time comes, a blade of grass turns into a thunderbolt, and Indra's Vajra into a blade of grass. Then there was a wise ancient among them, who now reminded Sumba and Nishumba, my lord, when you performed your great tapasya in the Pushkara Kshetra, and the Lord Brahma appeared before you, you asked invincible against the men of all races, but you have no boon to protect you against women. 3 women here have come to kill you now. Why, this is the Devi Bhagavati, who devours time itself at the end of the kalpa, who has come to drink your blood. She is Sandhya, the refuge of the Devas. She is Gayatri, the mother of the Vedas. She is the eternal one who always was before the 3 great gods. She is the mother of the fathers of the universe. She is Umya, gentle, and if you ask for sanctuary at her feet like lotuses, she will not refuse you, and you will be saved, and with you the race of Asuras. I am an old man, my lords, and I have seen a great deal of life. I beg you, listen to me now, for what I say is wisdom. She is the truth who has come hunting in your garden. You cannot resist her, but only submit whatever she wants. Now Sumba roared so that his palace shook. Fools, hold your tongues. You have fled because you are cowards and so attached to living. Fate rules the world, and who can change what is written in her book? I don't care at all if I live or die, and what is written must be. Why, even Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are not beyond fate. All that are born must finally die, and not the time of their birth, nor their dying do they choose themselves. So when I have accomplished everything I was born for, I too will perish. But I am not afraid of dying, and if you are, my Asuras, I pity you, for there is no cure for your illness. Indeed, take yourself down to Patala and cower there for the rest of your miserable lives, if you want to let fear rule you. My dharma is to stay and fight the woman on the lion. She and her dark friends have killed so many of my demons. They have killed Dharma, Lochana, Chandra, and Munda. My dharma is to have revenge on the women, or to die trying. And I am no coward, that I will abandon my dharma for the sake of living some thousands of years in fear and trembling. He paused and let his dark gaze wander over his ministers and generals. Finally said, now tell me, Asuras, must I don mail and go out to fight the women myself? Or is there any among you who will still go to battle for me? The fierce Ratabija had been straining as if on a leash. He sprang up, a head taller than any other Asura in that Sabha. He was lean and sleek, and altogether sinister demon. He said in his low, hoarse voice, my lord Sumba, let me go to war. I will bring you either the women's heads or them alive for the pleasure of your bed. Sumba clasped his general, and Ratabija set out with an Aksuhini, twice the size of the legion of Chanda and Munda had taken to battle. He went with chariots and horses, elephants, and all kinds of weapons and foot soldiers. By now, the three Devis had left the garden where they had been, for the corpse that lay there had begun to decompose, and a stench of putrefaction filled the place. Chandika, Ambika, and Kali had taken themselves off to a diamond mountain upon the Himalayas and sat on its peak, still singing sweetly to each other. When they saw Ratabhija's army approaching, a sea of fighting demons, the Devi's laughter rang out under an azure sky. Ambika raised her conch to her lips and blew a sky-shaking bass on it. Watching from the safety of invincible Vimanas, the Devas were exalted. Ratabhija also came humbly before the Devi Ambika and said, "Your beauty is indeed past compare, Devi, and it is no wonder my master Sumba desires you. I am his general, Ratabhija, and I have come to take you to my lord, dead or alive. I am no Dumra Chandar Munda that you will ever vanquish me in battle. I am invincible, Devi, yet I will speak with you first and try to show you the path of wisdom for one endowed with such beauty as you. Yours is a rare gift, Devi, for there is no other woman as lovely as you. Such beauty is wasted on the battlefield. It belongs in happiness. Ask any Brahmana, and he will tell you that Srinagara and Shanti are the most desirable of the Navarasas. Wrath and war are bestial and lowly, and only meant for those who are not born blessed with the qualities that enhance love. You have no such lack. Indeed, one so exquisite as you is created just for love. Why do you want to pervert your essential nature, your sweet dharma, and seek war instead? Vishnu lives with Lakshmi, Brahma with Saraswati, and Shiva with Uma. Indra is with his Sachi, Kama with Rati. The great trees of the earth have creepers twined around them. The stag is with his hind in the jungle, the tiger with the tigress. It is only those who are impotent or ugly who embrace a life of sannyas in their youth, because they cannot enjoy love. You are young, you are enchanting. My lord Shumba and Nishumba are magnificent demons, handsome beyond describing, powerful, and manly beyond telling. Choose either of them and become his queen. This is the way of wisdom for you, Devi." The Devi Ambika laughed at Ratabhija's face. She said in a rumbling voice, "Dim-witted demon, I have already told your master's previous messengers I will only marry a man who is stronger than I am, one who vanquishes me in battle. Let either Sumba or his brother quell me on the field, and I will be his wife. Why, bandy words with me. I have heard you are a warrior, Ratabhija. Come, show me your valor." She spoke so scornfully that the formidable demon attacked her at once. He shot 1,000 arrows at the Devi and her lion, serpentine shafts, but she cut them down with archery that defied sea. Ratabhija hardly saw the Devi's arms move. All he saw was the barbs being shredded in the air and falling harmlessly all around the radiant goddess. He gazed in awe at this, and next moment was struck unconscious by a clutch of blunt arrows that struck his head and knocked him down. None of them drew blood, for it seemed that the Devi knew what would happen if this demon's blood was spilt. Ratabhija lay in a deep swoon while his soldiers panicked around him. Their cries echoed against the mountain's glassy sides as they fled everywhere. Bomba, bomba, which is the call for extreme danger. Sumba heard the desperate cry in his faraway palace, and rising from his throne said, "Let the Kambojas and Kalakyas march against the woman. She must be tamed today." These were two of the fiercest tribes of fighting Asuras that Sumba commanded. They were the elite warriors of the kingdom. and specially trained and mounted on elephants and other special elephants, and they steamed into battle against the Devis. Ambika saw them coming. She raised her bow and pulled on its string, and the ground shook at that sound. When she blew her conscious well, the Kambojas and Kalakayas slowed their mad rush at her. Chandika opened her black mouth wide as a cavern and gave a roar that echoed above Ambika's conch shell, and the lion roared louder still. Kalika pursed her dark lips and whistled piercingly, and that sound ruptured the eardrums of the thousands of asuras, and blood trickled from their ears. But Sumba's fighting demons paused only for a moment, when they roared back their defiance and swarmed up the mountain again, armed to the teeth, so highly trained that they would die without a thought for their king. They swept up the mountain in a wave and loosed another tide of arrows at the sky, blotting out the sun, mantling the air in darkness. The Devis managed to dissipate their first round of shafts, but they saw that the demons who had come to battle now were exceptional warriors, and they would be hard-pressed to contain them once they gained the higher mountain. When the first warriors' legions clambered over the rim of the peak on which the Devis were, the battle grew more intense than it had been. Rivers of deadly arrows were everywhere. Thousands of demons died, but now the Devis sighed and moaned and even shrieked with the effort they were forced to make to keep these asuras at bay. The mountains rang. Demons, even when they died, they seemed to roar in exultation. Suddenly, a blinding luster lit that mountain like another sun risen from the very rocks. In it, there materialized yet another Devi, dazzling even beside the brightness of Ambika and the hunting Kali. She was the Lord Brahma's own Shakti, came to fight at the goddess's side. In moments, 100 such lights shone in the Himalayas. And as the Kambojas and Kalakayas stood gaping, out of those refulgences stepped 100 Devis, the Shaktis of hundreds of gods, all armed, all riding immaculate Vahanas and Vimanas. Brahma Shakti, Brahma, came mounted on her white swan. She wore the string of beads and her kamandalu beside her weapons. Vishnu Shakti was called Vaishnavi, and she flew on Garuda's back and carried the Shankh, the Gada, the Kamala, and the Chakra in her hand. The Devi Shankari arrived on her black bull, Nandishvara, who is hardly less than a god himself. She bore the crescent moon on her brow, a king cobra coiled around her body, Amlet on her arm, and the trishul of 3 fires in her right hand. She also held a damaru in her left hand and made a chatter rhythmically whenever she wished. Kartikeya, resplendent Shakti, Kumari Devi, who was his spitting image, arrived on her shimmering peacock. She held Agni Devi's spear in her hands. Indra's Shakti, the fair Indrani, arrived on her 4-tusked white elephant, who trod air. She wore the brilliant ornaments of Devaloka and carried the 1,000-jointed thunderbolt of the Lord of the Devas, the glittering Vajra. The Shaktis of Vishnu's avatars came as well. The Bahari was a great female bull, big as a hill. The Narasimhi was as awesome as the Narasimha himself. She was half lion, half dark woman. Her weapons were her fangs like swords and her talons like scimitars. Yama Shakti arrived riding on the black buffalo, her staff of retribution in her black hand, and she was both lovely and terrible. All that mountain teemed with an army of Shaktis, all delighted at their chance they had to fight a great war. The Shaktis of Kubera, Surya, Soma, Vayu, the Adyatas and Vasus, Agni, Varuna, Ganesha, and all the others appeared on that mountain alight. They came armed and eager for battle. The Devi Ambika exulted, and Shumba's demon army cowered at the refulgence of the Shaktis. Then it is told that Mahadeva Shiva appeared before his Devi Ambika and said, "Now raise the race of Asuras from creation, and let there be peace among the world. Let the Devas rule from Devaloka again. Let Brahmanas perform their yagyas. Let Dharma thrive, and all the created live in harmony." When Shiva spoke thus, another most dreadful female, Shakti, issued out of Chandika's body. She sprang forth as a light, but soon stood embodied before Shankara. She was entirely horrific, her hair wild and her face dark and grimacing, her fangs protruding, her black breast exposed. Hundreds of howling jackals surrounded her, and she said with an awful smile to Shiva, "Shankara, be our messenger today. Go to Shumba and tell him to leave Devaloka and fly down into Patala, where he belongs. Tell the demons, brothers, to save themselves and their race from death. Otherwise, let them come to the field and die." Shiva Sulapana flew to Shumba, who was arrogantly in the Sudharma, on the throne that the worlds worship, Indra's throne, that is a single immense ruby. Shiva materialized in the form of light and said, "I am Hara, destroy the Tripura, and I have come to save your life. Shumba, leave Amaravati, relinquish your power over the Swaga and the Bhumi, fly down to Patala, where you belong. Bali and Prahlada rule vast kingdoms there. You shall also be a king in that netherworld. If you do not listen to me, Shumba, you will find death for yourselves at the Deva Ambika's hands." Shiva vanished, a bright mist before the Asura's eyes. But Shumba roared his anger that anyone dared challenge him, and he sent another 10 legions out to battle against the Devis in the mountains. 1,000,000 demons, their weapons and armor glistening in the sun, came swarming up that mountain. The Devi crooned in delight. Then they roared and screamed softly for joy, almost as though they were about to make love. Then they hunted the demons on that mountain until Asura blood flowed torrents down its pale slopes. The Devi Ambika raised a whole Aksubini with archery, such as the stars had never seen before. Typhoons of arrows, oceans of arrows rose in the firmament at her will, and the sky resounded with demon shrieks and howls and curses at their heads and arms, their legs and face were struck off before they even had time to raise their own weapons. Some had their chests shredded in slivers, and others were cut clean in two at the waist. Chandika hunted even more fiercely. Grown vast again as the mountain itself, she swept down on the Asuras and fed on them. She stuffed legions of foot soldiers and whole sections of cavalry in her mouth without favor and chewed on them, her eyes rolling, blood dribbling down her jowls. She seemed to favor the elephants most of all and ate those with more relish than anything else. She carried a vat of harsh cane liquor in her hands and swallowed from it often, and Kalika was as terrible. Brahma Shakti, the Brahmani, killed the enemy in the strangest manner. She blessed them with holy water from the Kamandalu she carried in her hands, and they were burned to ashes at her purification, screaming, Shiva's Devi, Maheswari, plunged her great bull at the enemy, and the beast trampled thousands of demons after with flying hoofs, and gored twice as many with his horns, which were sharp as swords. That Shakti herself, then incinerated tens of thousands of asuras with the three fires from her trishul, which she swung everywhere, and it seemed 3 blinding rivers of colored lights flowed all over the white mountain. Vaishnavi swung her mace, the Komodaki, and felled legions. But she was not content and loosed the Sudarshana at the enemy. The wheel of fire flew everywhere, and the demons in its path had no time even to scream before they were beheaded or carved in strips. Some of the chakra ashed whole. Indra's Shakti, Indrani, cast her Vajra as Shumba's fighting demons, and it was no less final than the wheeling chakra. It erupted across the Himalayas, and 1,000 jagged streaks of unearthly lightning consumed the demons. Narasimbi stalked his uneven field. Her talons were like devastras and disseminated the demons. The demons quailed at her growls, and she hunted them with dread, and tore them their throats and their hearts out, and devoured them as they stood petrified before her. Ambika struck the demon down in waves, and Kalika and Chandika tore their flesh and devoured them. Kumari raised Aksohinis with arrows of light, and Varuni swept away phalanxes with her lucid flying pasa. Shumba's army was being routed on every side, and the Asuras fled down that mountain, screaming in panic, slipping over the blood slicks of their slain comrades. The Devas showered celestial blooms down on the army of Devis, and the luster and fragrance of those flowers terrified the demons more than ever. All around, the peaks echoed with the desperate cry of Boomba, Boomba. So Vedavyasa continues with this story to King Janamejaya. Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshvari Mata ki jai, Bule Baba ki jai. Maybe we'll complete the story. It's a little bit long, but I think we can do it. Let's go on with chapter 28. When Ratabija heard the calls of distress, he roused himself and came to fight the Devis again. He came mounted on his chariot that was as easy through the air as it was upon the ground. He flew upon the Himalayas, his eyes red as kusumi flowers, and his roars ringing around the terrified screams of his soldiers being slaughtered by the legions of goddesses. Once this demon had set into tapasya to Rudra, a penance that was so rigorous that not even the great rishis could match it. Shiva appeared before this demon and granted him a rare boon, that if a drop of his blood fell on the ground, 1,000 asuras would spring up from it, each one as powerful as himself. Now, blowing on a great horn, Ratabija came to war like Yama himself. The first Devi he saw was Vaishnavi hunting from golden Garuda's back. Ratchabija cast a Shakti at her, howling like a tornado, bright as a sunflower. But the meridian goddess struck the weapon of the fire aside disdainfully with her magical mace. Almost at once she loosed the Sudarsana chakra at the demon. It flew at him, spitting fire, and took him in the chest. Ratchabija's wild laughter rang out across the mountainous background. A spring of scarlet blood flowed from his breast where the chakra struck him. It flowed in a stream on that pale peak. For every drop of that demon's blood that touched the earth, 1,000 demons sprang up, each one as terrible as Raktabija himself. Indrani cast her Vajra at him. The demon's laughter rang louder as still more of his blood flowed. Like awful spectra, thousands and thousands of Raktabijas sprang up. In anger, not knowing what was happening, the other Devis attacked Raktabija. Brahmani struck him with her Danda, Maheshwari struck him with her Trishul, and Bahari gored him with silver tusk. 10,000 Raktabijas struck back at the army of Devis with storms of arrows, weapons, and clubs. The goddess fought back more majestically than ever, but for every drop of blood they spilled, 1,000 more Raktabijas appeared. Heaven and earth teemed with Raktabijas, millions of them. The Devis were shocked. They were helpless. Not even they could contend with an army of demons that multiplied itself endlessly whenever it bled. The Shaktis dared not think what would happen if Shumba and Nishumba came to battle now. The deity Ambika turned to the black Chamunda. With anxiety in her face for the first time, the fair goddess said, "You must drink every drop of blood we spill before it falls on the earth, or the war is lost." The Devi Chamunda turned herself into a whirlpool upon the field, a great storm with thirsty lips that were everywhere. Bhadrakali began to quaff the jets of blood that sprang from the wounds of the other Devis, and Ambika opened on the million Raktabijas. The army of goddesses cut the army of Raktabijas to shreds, and not a drop of that blood fell on the earth, but Chamunda swelled it all. She went caroling around that mountain. She flew singing in the air, and she was drunk on Asura's blood, and cried that it was sweeter than any wine she'd ever tasted. Why, she drained off the demons, leaving them pale as lotuses, while she bloated into a monstrous form swollen with gore. She was black and crimson cloud that engulfed the field of war, and every Asura on it, in as much time as it takes to tell. Just Raktabija himself stood alive amidst the bloodless corpse of all the demons closed in on him together. Of all the demons that were sprung from his blood. The Devis, Ambika and Chamunda, closed in on him together. Ambika hewed off his head with her axe, and in a wink, Chamunda seized both his head and his trunk, drained them at a gulp, and flung his bloodless carcass down amongst all the rest. Ambika raised her conch and blew a blast on it, sending all the other demons hurrying from the mountain field. Those demons fled to their king Shumba on his ruby throne and cried, "Raktabija is dead." Ambika cut his head from his neck, and Chamunda drank his blood. The army of Devis is invincible, Lord. It is better we abandon Devi Loka and fly down to Patala before they kill us all, O Shumba, before the very race of Asuras is extinct, my Lord. But death stalked Shumba close, and his wisdom had fled in alarm. He sprang up from his throne. His eyes were vermilion, and his dark lips throbbed in fury. In a low voice, the Lord of the Demons said, "Cowards, you fly to Patala if you want. Or better still, go fall at the Devi's feet and beg for her protection." But I am Sumba, master of the worlds, and I mean to kill that woman or to die fighting them. His voice rolled like thunder. Every man's death is already ordained when he is born into this world. I do not fear death or want to prolong my life by being a coward. My honor is more important to me than my life. Nishumba, my brother, I mean to face these evil women in battle. Will you come with me? But Nishumba cried, there is no need for you to go into battle as long as I'm alive. Stay here in your sabha, my lord, and I will bring you Ambika shortly, alive and warm for your bed. His brother blessed Nishumba when the warriors knelt before his king. The Brahmanas and the singers of the Asura's palace sang praises to Nishumba, and he mounted his golden chariot and went to war against the Devis. He went with a teeming army, legion upon legion of savage demons swarmed around him. Sumba also gathered his army and went with his younger brother. But it is related that he honored the dharma of war and remained behind Nishumba's army as just a spectator. Indra and his devas, the yakshas, apsaras, and all the other celestials gathered in the sky above and settled the manas hidden in clouds. Even as he approached the Devi Ambika, Nishumba loosed a storm of fire at her. Towering flames from the demons' astras licked the earth and sky. The snow on that white mountain melted and icy rivers flowed down the sides, yet not a shaft of that demon's fight reached the Devi or Kali at her side. The Devi Ambika, clear, beautiful, mocking laughter rang there like another's crystal stream in the crisp air, and she said to Kalika, how powerful a thing is hope. These fools see the corpse of 1,000,000 demons all around them. They see jackals feeding on Ratabija's carcass, yet they come to war against us, still hoping to win. Her eyes shone like cold planets, but I mean to kill Shumba and his brother today before all their legions. She raised her bow and covered the advancing Nishumba in a cloak of arrows sharp as serpent fangs. That demon smashed them into dust with brilliant volleys of its own. The Himalaya quaked with the sound of their bowstrings. Nishumba had come into battle surrounded by an Asura host. These savage demons now flew at the Devi from every side. The pitch of battle rose to crescendo, and the Devi was just a blur as she fought that army by herself, killing 1,000 Asuras every moment and turning the streams of melted ice that flowed down the mountain scarlet with demons' blood. The mountain air was thickness of screams and roars, all cut off abruptly by the Devi's luminous archery. Now, she loosed her line at the enemy, and the golden creature came to hunt the demons like a feline embodiment of Yama. Its mane quivering, its roars terrifying, it fell on Nishuma's soldiers. The lion tore their throats out like fangs. It ripped their chest open, and their innards with talons like swords. It drank their blood and ate their burning flesh. The screams of those beasts hunted rang above every other sound on the field. Meanwhile, Shumba grew impatient and came up the mountain with his legions by another pass. Kali and Chamunda met him there, and a pitched battle broke out. The black Devis slew 100,000 of Shumba's Asuras. Chamunda feasted on their flesh. Then, parting his army like a great hill standing in the course of a river, Shumba, emperor of the demons, stood forth. His archery was such that even those two Devis could not resist him. He struck Kalika deep into her breast with an arrow. So she swooned, and next moment he pierced Chamunda in her belly, and she fell. At once Ambika rode up on her line, both she and her beast roaring as she snatched Kali and Chamunda up from the ground. Her eyes were scarlet with fury, and just seeing her for the first time, Sumba stood transfixed, trembling as if she had struck him through the heart with a shaft of primeval desire. He had never seen anyone like her in all his life. He stood unmanned, weak and with love, and the sign of it showed plainly. Ambika saw the great demon, the lord of the three worlds, thus, and she threw back her head and laughed at him. She saw clearly in his eyes the tumult his heart felt. She saw desperate love, and then the truth dawning that he would never possess her, but only die at her hands. And she saw that even in that certainty, Sumba felt strange contentment. Just then, Nishumba, who had climbed there by another trail, challenged her thunderously. In his hand he held a gleaming sword and a shield embossed with 8 crescent moons. That towering demon first fell on the Devi's lion and struck him several times, and his blood flowed copiously. In a wink, the demon whirled his blade above his head and flung it like lightning at the Devi Ambika. She struck it to powder with the languid bow of her mace, and then struck Nishumba on his arm, drawing a screech of pain from him. Nishumba raised up a battle axe now, and swift as the thought, cut the Devi in her side. But with a smile, she staunched the wound, and it healed miraculously before the demon's eyes. Then she made the strangest sound from her throat, as if 1,000 great temple bells singing all together. A death knell. Nishumba saw she drank deeply from the flagon of wine in her hands, and her eyes glittered. Meanwhile, the Devas had flown down the mountains, where an encounter was underway between them and the Asuras. The ones of light battled brutally on that field, and 1,000 demons died every moment by weapon of fire and light. The Himalayas were strewn with corpses. The air was full of screams of those cut down. Indeed, the air was a single long scream, for the whole army of demons perished every moment, consumed by incendiary devastras. Nishumba saw his Asuras dying all around him, and with a fulminant yell, he flew at the Devi again with another great mace. He smashed the lion on its head, such a blow that the beast sank to its knees for a moment. Nishumba's triumphant laughter drowned out every other noise on the field. He was truly a great demon now, a demon from the deepest pit of hell. He had grown with Mahima and loomed over the mountains like another peak sprung up suddenly. The Asura bared his fangs like streaks of lightning and struck the Devi Ambika twice with his mace, blows like thunder. The sun hid his face in fear. The sky grew black as midnight. Then Ambika shone like another sun risen on the mountain. Her voice was the very voice of time as she cried in anger, "Dare you strike me, fool? I will send you headless into heaven." Next moment, it seemed a bright crescent moon rose for a moment on the mountain and then vanished. It was the arc of the Devi's axe, made as it struck Nishumba's head from his neck, and the grisly thing went bouncing down the mountainside, still roaring. Then the strangest thing, the demon's lips on his head that went hurtling down the sheer slope still swore at the Devi, crying how he, Nishumba, would cut her into small pieces and have her for his evening meal. And here above, the Asura's headless trunk still attacked the Devi, swinging the studded mace at her, at the Devas around her, at Kali and Chamunda. If any of his own demons came in the way of Nishumba's wild mace strokes, they died, because being headless, he had no eyes with which to see. With a twinkling laugh to see this bizarre performance, the Devi Ambika severed the demon's arms and legs with 4 sickle-headed arrows rose, Nishumba fell like one mountain falling on another, and 5 rivers of his dark blood swept down, 5 valleys in the Cascades. When his demons saw Nishumba fall like that, they cried out. Mumba resounded everywhere as they threw their weapons down and fled in disarray to Sumba. Sumba saw his demons running to him and asked, "Where is my brother? Why are these men fleeing the battle like cowards?" The Asura soldiers cried, "Lord, your brother lies dead on the battlefield." The Devi cut off his head, arms, and legs, and his blood flows down the Himalayas in space. O king, the Devi slew all his men, except just us, who fled in fear. Sumba, this is the great Devi, the origin of the stars and the time, who has come to kill us. We beg you, Lord, don't face her in battle. She is no ordinary woman. She is the Parashakti coming hunting us. She is like another night of the Pralaya, and the Devas sing hymns to her from the sky. Time is more powerful than any king, even you, great Sumba. Time has humbled Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. She has humbled Indra, and today we fear she comes to humble you, O king, and the very race of Asuras. Time is a wheel that spins round. When she favored you, you drove Indra and his people out of Devaloka and ruled the worlds. But now she shows us a different face, and a woman riding a lion raises the demon army as she pleases. Lord Chumba, it isn't the Devi or the Devas who mow down our Asuras like stalks of corn in a field. It is time herself, inexorable Kal. Fly down to Patala at once, Sumba. Save yourself, save us all. And when the time spins in our favor again, we will return and rule Swarga and Bhumi once more. You are the Lord of the demons. You are the hope of our race. If the Devi kills you, we your people shall all be lost. But then those frightened demons shrank back from their king. They saw that his eyes had turned the color of blood and rolled in wrath. His mighty frame shook, and he said in a soft and deadly voice, "Fools, what are you saying? My people have perished fighting for me. My heroic generals have died, and you want me to run away from this war like a coward? What will my life be worth if I save it thus? What is this life of mine worthy anyway, when my brother Nishumba, conqueror of the Devas, lies headless on the field, slain by a woman? As you say, time is all-powerful, and when it is time for my creature to be born, so he is, so too. When the moment of his death comes, no one can save him. We cannot choose when we live or die, but we can decide whether we do so as heroes and warriors, whose fame will live forever, or as cowards, on whose name prosperity will spit. Why, Brahma himself dies when he has lived 100 years of his life. 14 Indras live and die during each of Brahma's days. But when his time comes, even the creator of the world passes on. Vishnu's life is twice as long as Brahma's, and Shiva's twice Vishnu's. But when their time comes, the great gods die too, and all these worlds and heavens with them. And just as all the living must die, all that die live again. I care not a whit for death, my Asuras, but for honor I will give up my life, prepare my chariot, and those who will ride with me into battle. He was so majestic that the noble demons, that his people, were emboldened, and not one of them fled the battle. They would rather die than abandon their king. The Asura Samba, Lord of the worlds, climbed on the pinnacle of the towering Himalaya and saw the Devi Ambika on her lion. She was so completely beautiful, it seemed that all the enchantment in the 3 worlds was gathered within her. She wore exquisite ornaments and silks, and the Devas and all the other beings were worshipping her with sacred sotas and parijata blossoms. From time to time, she blew on her conch to celebrate her victory, or made with her lips the fine and strange sound of temple bells. Sumba saw her for the second time and was completely bewitched. He thought, how lovely she is, lovelier than any other woman in all time. Yet she is peerless warrior too. Look at her, the flush of youth on her cheeks, her limbs so delicate, so womanly. But she feels no passion. She belongs to us in a soft bed. But here she is killing asuras for her pleasure instead. She has killed my generals and my Nishimba, but I cannot help still wanting her. Nothing else matters to me but to have her in my arms. But she is not susceptible to the sweetest flattery and endearments, or even the most potent mantras. We have tried both and failed to move her. Oh, how shall I subdue her to make her a mark, not for arrows in battle, but for me? Then he quieted his fever that made his blood boil through his body. More calmly he said to himself, but her feminine appearance is deceptive. Why, it is death's snare that has claimed 1,000,000 asuras' life. She is not in the least as she seems, neither soft nor vulnerable. She is stronger than 100,000 demons. She fell an army before her. She is terrible, death incarnate, and merciless. She divides herself in 3 and drinks our blood and eats our flesh. I must not let her appearance deceive me, as it did the others. She is a dreadful enemy, and I must kill her. Sumba approached the Devi and said, come, let us fight. But, oh, this war between us is such a waste of time, of lives, of your woman's nature. I was taught that the arms of love is a woman's battlefield where she wins her soft victories. Her eyes are her arrows. How coarse is it, O Devi, to see a woman as lovely as you take the field of war. Whither then your modesty, beautiful one? She sat on her wild beast, smiling coolly at him. The demon went on, musingly, exquisite one, you abound in such contradictions. Foolish Chamunda, with their full voices, are your nearest companions. Instead of a golden chariot, you ride the fearful beast. I beg you, either abandon this weird life of yours or take another form. Ugly, black, fanged, clawed. Otherwise, leave all the madness behind you. Come away with me and be my queen, for you are much too beautiful and tender for me to fight. The Devi Ambika saw how aroused that demon was. Just looking at her, she laughed delightedly and said, poor demon, passion distresses you so much that you will not fight me. Here are Kalika and Chamunda. They are fierce enough for you to face in battle. Fight them. She turned to Black Kali and said with the sweetest voice, this Shumba likes only fierce women, Kalika. Kill him for me, please. Her crimson tongue licking her lips, Kali picked up her mace and advanced on the Lord of the Asuras. She was little like Yama come to the mountains, except that she was a woman. A fervid battle began between Kali and Sumba. She struck him first with a blow, like a volcano erupting then. He struck back like spring thunder. When Sumba struck Kali squarely across her face, she roared, and the storm clouds like the storm clouds of Pralaya, and it seemed that the mountains they fought upon would fall into the sea. She grew immense before Shumba's eyes, raised her mace high over her head, and with a single blow shattered the demon's golden chariot and crushed his swarthy and his horses. At the last moment, the demon himself leapt out of his ratha and was saved. He stormed at her and fetched her staggering blow across her dark breast with his mace. It rocked Kali back on her heels. Her tongue lolled like a streak of scarlet lightning from her mouth, and her howl shook the sky. Shumba's fiendish laughter echoed there, shaking snow and ice off the pines that grew all around them. Quick as thought, Kalika seized up her axe and hewed off Shumba's left hand. His naked wrist sprang a geyser of blood, and his bellows rang across the Himalayas. as he tried to staunch the flow by holding his hand to his lips. His face and body were drenched in gore. Still howling, his valor undimmed, great Shumba hewed again at Kali with his right hand. The blow landed on her belly and drew a cry from her, but quick as light, she cut off his right hand as well. Roaring with blood cascading from his severed wrists, the demon leapt high into the air and fetched Kali a stupendous kick with both of his feet, and she fell over. Rising with a curse, now streaked herself with Shumba's blood, she hewed at his legs with her curved sword and struck them both off at the knees. 4 streams of Shumba's blood flowed down the Himalayas. Still he roared as fiercely as ever. Still he tried to hobble toward the Black Devi to attack her. His spirit was unvanquished. Now, almost with admiration for the indomitable Asura, Kalika took his head off his neck in a flash of blood like a lotus from its stem. When the brilliant head of Shumba, master of the 3 worlds, rolled down the Himalayas and fell into an icy mountain stream that would bear it to the sea, the Devas broke into song. They lauded the 3 Devis on the mountain, Ambika, Chamunda, and Kalika. A fresh breeze sprang up there and rippled the streams of Shumba's blood that gushed from his severed parts until his huge body was drained. The breeze became a wind and covered that magnificent demon's corpse with snow, as if to embalm the memory of his courage. All the quarters were clear and auspicious, and a marvelous current of hope surged through the world again. Fires in every altar burned pure and smokeless, and the hobbies were untainted again throughout creation. For no longer did demons rule the 3 worlds. Their yoke had been broken by the blessed Devi. "O king," said my master Vedavyasa to Janamejaya, "any man who hears the tale of how the Devi slew Shumba and Nishumba, especially who hears it many times and realizes its inner meaning, shall have his every desire fulfilled. And those who hear this story with true devotion, why, they even get moksha when they leave their life." Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshvari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai.